It's actually the foundation for everything. It cuts across everything. And that's perception. And this is the thing that I've seen. The people who are really amazing at this job have a sense of this and take real ownership of what is the perception of me and my team across the rest of the organization. How do I build those relationships? And a lot of that is looking at the bigger picture, not always looking at short-term things or looking at the way we think things should be done in a product company. It's saying, okay, we want to do these things for good reasons. They want to do different things for good reasons. What's the bigger picture here? What's the story? What's the motivation? How do we work together to create success rather than just trying to be great at it, things the way we think that we're supposed to be?
Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast with Brito, Moita and João. We hope you enjoy.
In today's episode, Brito and myself, Moita, we're thrilled to have with us Randy Silver, a mastermind in product management. Randy brings a wealth of experience and is here to share some game-changing strategies and insights. From bridging departmental gaps to navigating the latest in AI trends, he's got tips that every product manager needs to hear. So make sure you stick around until the end for some golden nuggets of wisdom. Let's dive in.
Welcome, Randy. How's it going? How are you doing?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, since 2 minutes ago when we said hello first.
I'm going to say about a month ago when we were all in Lisbon, for sure. Ruined the illusion.
Yeah, great times. It was also great getting to know you face-to-face in Lisbon and be there in the Productized conference. And thank you so much for accepting this invitation to join us and to chat a little bit and to share with our community also things you've learned and what's your challenges, things you've been working on. So yeah, let's start with a question about your personal life. What's a recent weekend that you enjoyed?
Oh, let's see. I've got an 11-year-old boy, so when I get to hang out with him and do fun things with him and my wife, we have a good time. And he's an adventurous eater. So there was a weekend recently where we had the opportunity to go into Chinatown, have some soup dumplings together, and have some really nice food. And he's gotten into a sport called pickleball, which he plays with my grandfather. It's a lot like paddle, but it's become really popular in the States. No walls. It's like 4 of them fit on a tennis court. It's a lot of fun. He is unnaturally good at it and kicks my ass, but it's fun to play with him.
Nice. I've heard of it, but I've never seen. Maybe I need to research a bit about it. Sounds fun.
It's like anything. People can take it way too seriously, but when you do it recreationally, it's a fun thing.
I heard that they are even reconverting parking lots to pickleball courts and everything.
That's cool. It has
doing it inside malls, and it's become potentially a little too popular in the States.
Cool. All right. Talking about popular, you're one of the biggest names, I would say, in product management, a lot because of your podcasts with Mind the Product, the things you've been sharing. You've been sharing with the community for quite a long time. So I guess a lot of our listeners already crossed paths with you online somewhere. But can you give us a bit of an introduction of your background and what you've been up to?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. The short version of the long story is I actually came out of school and was a music journalist for about 10 years. But that helped me get started. I helped Amazon get started with their music store in both the US and UK. And at a certain point in doing all that, as an editor, I wanted to pull together all the stuff, all the different writers, and I was working with designers and trying to design new templates and tell stories in different ways. So I worked with developers and always trying to get everyone to concentrate on how can we bring everything together to be greater than the sum of its parts and deliver our customers. And as my career progressed and I decided I didn't want to be a journalist anymore, I wanted to do other things, I became an interactive producer, and then eventually someone offered me a job as a product manager. And I didn't know what that was, and they told me about Lean and Agile and Scrum and things like that. And I said, oh, wow, there's other people doing this and it's not just winging it. But as my career progressed from product manager to head of product to CPO at times, it was that whole thing of taking people from different disciplines, getting them to work together, creating something that's greater than some of its parts, targeted to letting our customers. It turned out to be a really transferable skill set. So I think I still do the same thing. In some ways, I still think of myself as an editor. And now for the last 5 years, I've been coaching and consulting and building communities. And it's really more about the same thing. How do I help people to succeed in ways that maximize the value that they can find for themselves and for everybody else?
It's a funny thing that you like. Basically, it's all about winging it, right? Just figuring out ways to do it. And it's like, oh, there's actually a discipline for it and structure around it. It's a cool realization at some point that, okay, people have structured this confusing thing.
Oh God, it helps so much because I did some things really well, but I was making so many mistakes. And there were so many things. You always look back and say, earlier in my career, I wish I had known this, I wish I had known that. But I wish I had known about the community of people to accelerate that knowledge as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also why we believe that like learning from other people's experiences is super critical to unlock the challenges that you face.
Sharing is really caring, actually.
Where have I heard that before?
Yeah, I think I've heard that one as well. Yeah, and was there a specific pivotal moment, like when you had that click or when you had that realization that, oh, this is the area where I want to get myself into and grow into? Was there something that happened, or was it just naturally progressing towards it?
I think it was natural. I got very bored trying to fill the same hole every week. Sometimes as a journalist, there's only so many different. I was a music journalist, so there's only so many different stories you can tell. You can review the album, review the show, and you're interviewing people, and it's band has their first hit, they're on the comeback tour, somebody going solo, things like that. There's only so many different stories you can tell. It's even worse in sport. They won, they lost, and there's a couple of other variations.
They
and some
always
people
find things to talk about and discuss until late hours.
Oh, absolutely, totally. And there's huge amounts of passion in both, and it's wonderful. But and some people go into the craft of how can I tell the story and how can I be inventive with that. I wanted to do it not with the words, but with the structures and putting together the publications themselves and setting editorial direction and things like that. And that just led to essentially product strategy for those things. But I didn't know that's what it was at the time. And I just kept following that path. I went to work with, after I left music journalism, I ended up with radio groups for a long time. And so I was still in the same world. I was still working with the same people. I was just doing a complementary role to what I had done in the past. And just kept following it. I ended up in banking and retail and education and arts groups and doing tons of different things. And the nice part is it's always been really interesting. It's always fun to learn something new. And I still get to listen to music when I work, which is great.
Yeah, that's true. And picking up on that, can you tell us about the significant challenge that you overcome during this experience?
Yeah, I think we'll get to this a lot when we talk about the recent talk I did in the product environment canvas. But the difference between being excellent at a local level and doing what I thought was right and what my team thought was right versus learning about other people and how to succeed in a larger environment, how to succeed in a company, how to make my team succeed in a company. There's some really big lessons there, and it can be really challenging, especially for earlier in your career. If you're someone who's into the craft of product, you read the books, you read the blogs, you listen to podcasts and videos and go to the conferences. And we all talk about this brilliant stuff and about how you can do it right.
And then there's the problem
is, and then the problem is the marketing and the sales and the CTO and all these other people, they're not at the same conferences. They have a different language. They have different expectations. So learning how do you work with them I wish I had learned that earlier in my career.
Luckily, you came with a communications background, so you already had a bit of some of the structures and way of making yourself understood. But yeah, it's very challenging when you're not talking necessarily the same language. And before we get into that, and we're going to go right into it after this one, but I wanted to ask you, what's your current occupation? What's your day to day like? What are the things that you're up to? I know a couple of them. You're doing coaching, also the podcast, content creation, speaking at conferences. What's a typical week for you?
Sure. I've been very lucky. I've been able to structure my career around getting the opportunity to do things like this, to talk to other smart people as much as I possibly can and learn from them. And then I like to cross pollinate between everybody that I've learned. So there's some things I know, but so much that I've learned from other people. So some of that is podcasting and running and participating in some communities. I do have one called Products in the Ether. That's a free community for anyone who's interested in product stuff. We get together once a month for lean coffees and just have great chats. I do one with CPOs. I do some stuff with other coaches and participate in some other people's communities as well. So just getting to participate in all that and hear from everyone else is fantastic. That doesn't always pay the bills, though. What actually pays the bills is a combination of coaching and consulting. Most of the consulting is non-operational. Sometimes I'll do some things that are operational for people, and that can be fun. That can be fractional. I did a project last year that was a big service design project for someone. That was a lot of fun to roll up my sleeves and do that. But increasingly, more and more of it is fractional relationships with companies where I'll work with them on a retainer basis and do a combination of coaching and facilitating and some strategic advisory work. What I find is if I coach someone one on one, it can be great for both of us. We really enjoy it, but it's very subjective. I'm hearing their view of the world and I'm coaching them based on what I know. When I create a relationship with a company, it's even better because I get to the realities of the company. I hear from multiple angles. I get to know the politics and the processes and the strategy. And I'm not coaching you on the abstract on what's best in theory. I'm coaching you on how to get things done.
Yeah.
And then with the facilitation, it's almost a superpower of being able to go in, and one of the biggest challenges for people sometimes is changing other people's minds. And it's hard to be both a facilitator and a participant in some of these meetings. So bringing someone like me in to be the facilitator allows them to play a different role and create a different relationship with their stakeholders. And I'm subtly nudging in the right direction and creating the structure for them to have that chat. And that can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. And actually, I don't want to get into details on this topic, but would you consider that the role that you're filling in mostly with those engagements as product operations, or not really?
No, not really. It's very specifically with these, I'm not operational in most of them. I may do some advisory in terms of product ops and may tell them you should consider doing things in this way and things like that. But I'm not getting involved in the day-to-day. How do you structure your roadmaps? How do you do backlogs at scale? Things like that. I may facilitate some of those, but that's a different specialty. It's really interesting. It's sometimes fun to play with, but that's not what I spend most of my time doing.
That makes sense. Cool. Then let's get into the topic of your recent talk at Mind the Product conference. And yeah, maybe you can just give a brief introduction of the problem statement. What's the thing that led you to talk about that topic?
Sure. Because I get to talk to all of these smart people and I get to synthesize a lot, I noticed something a while back about what I believe separates the most amazing product people, the most successful product people I know from the people who are merely really good at it. And I'm sure your listeners, if they're the type of people who listen and watch this podcast, they're investing in their craft. They're already going to be good. But there is a big gap between just being good and being great. And there was an inciting incident for me, which is I was doing an operational role somewhere a while back, and I worked with someone who is the worst executive that I've ever worked with. And we've all got that person in our career. We've all got that one person who was just really difficult, probably not only for you, but for the rest of the company, or at least a significant group of people that you worked with.
Those who shall not be named.
Exactly. And I got really frustrated with them. It made me really uncomfortable. It made my team really uncomfortable, working with this individual. And part of it is an issue with empathy, just not being able to understand where they were coming from. Because I don't fundamentally believe they're a bad person. I don't believe they wanted the company to do badly. They just had a different view of what good looked like. and we didn't have a good way of working together on that. And when I ended up leaving that role, I said, I don't ever want to be in a situation like that again. And I'd already known a lot of these things, but the point of the talk was to put together a canvas to try and help people to avoid being in this predicament or find a way out of it as easily as possible.
Cool. And what are the key components of it? So it's, as I understand it, essentially a communication tool, like something that will help you engage with your team in a structured way. What are the key elements that you have there?
Sure. So I think it can be used two ways. I think it's really good for self-reflection as well as
Right.
communication, but it's helping you realize the what's going on and having that empathy for other people. So there's four parts to it. There's the three things that are table stakes for anybody to be any good at their job. And those are
Mm-hmm.
to understand the priorities that you have. So that comes in really important of what should we be working on, but just as importantly, what should we not be working on right now? What's really important and what's not. So you can go to people like Teresa Torres for opportunity solution trees to figure out how to do that, or look through John Cutler's work on work in progress and plenty of other people who
Mm-hmm.
have said really smart stuff in this area. But if you're trying to do too much or people are working on the wrong things, then you have no chance of success. So
Right.
being really targeted, really deliberate, really intentional, and having that very well understood. So
Do
that's the
you
first.
have a do you have a preferred approach or framework or technique that you use for prioritization, or do you use a combination of different ways of thinking?
I tend to think of this as a communication tool more than anything else, and it really depends on the maturity of the company and what's being used. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever's going to work to help people get on the same page, if there's structures in place, I'd rather work through them if they have any chance of success because you don't want to be too disruptive.
Right.
If there's nothing in place, there's two key things, I think. One is having a North Star of some sort, having a definition of success and how you'll know when you get there in the short term. So whether that's OKRs or North Star metrics or whatever, but having some clear definition that people can say, this is what we're actually trying to do.
Yeah.
The other thing is grounding it in understanding. And there's a lot to do there on storytelling. So if people have to understand the why, they have to feel some ownership, some passion, some understanding for it. So anything you can do to put those numbers in context, this is why we're doing it. It will enable us to do this. And it helps people it helps you to delegate decisions. Yeah, make delegate decision making down and across the organization. So people are making the right decisions because they know not only the number, but what is the reasoning behind trying to get those numbers.
That's a cool one.
Once you have your prioritization in place, then it's making sure you've got the right people because you need it's not just having great people, it's having great people who have the right capabilities, the right permissions, the right structure, the amount of energy to do that job. Not every team is the right team for every mission. So understanding what is it you're trying to do and then having the right people with the right organizational design and structure, culture, et cetera, and investing in them so that they feel motivated, they feel capable, they feel able to actually do that job. The next part of it, they all start with the letter P. So four things that start with the letter P has to be a model,
Hmm.
right? So third
Of
P
course,
is the
we're
process.
product people. We always need those kind of things.
Exactly. So the third one is processes. If you know what to do and you have the people to do it, you need to make sure that they have processes that enable them to deliver value. Especially in larger companies, you'll have lots of things that have built up over time, lots of red tape, lots of bureaucracy that is just there because we've always done it that way, or we used to do it that way, or you need to report something 16 different ways for six different stakeholders. And that's not helping you deliver value. That means you're spending 50, 60, 70% of your time on bureaucracy rather than on actually getting value out the door. So
Yeah.
looking at your processes and saying, what is the right way for us to optimize this? And again, there's no one right way to do this. It's going to be different in every company based on history, on what are the needs. But being able to do the Marie Kondo thing of once in a while saying, is this still necessary? Does this meeting spark joy? Does
Mm.
this report, does this the way of doing things make sense?
Yeah.
I like story mapping for this from how do you go from to how do you get to a decision and how do you get from decision to delivery points? And if you look at that story and say, what are the points along the way, and what is the point, and then pointing to each, examining each point along the way and saying, why are we doing this? Is this still necessary? Can we change it? Can we create efficiencies here? Maps, I think, are a really good way of diagramming this and framing the conversation.
How could you give a hypothetical example of how would you do that in a specific scenario?
Sure. So here's an easy one that's not a map, but I was having lunch the other day with a friend, and he was telling me about a guy in his team spends all day Friday putting together a report. And he knows very specifically, because Outlook in his organization has something that tells him how many people have opened an email. He knows that only 2 people in the organization have ever read this report. And one of them is him, the guy's boss. And say, okay, is this really worth a day a week of somebody's time? So they started putting something in the email that said, are you getting value from this report? And if not, we're going to demise the report in X number of weeks. And if no one responds, so you assume that the report's needed, but ask the question, is this giving value? Can we change it? What parts of it? So you can do discovery on your own process and see what are the ways, the tools and techniques we already know, and just ask, are there ways we can do things? And sometimes don't ask for permission. Sometimes if you have a sneaking suspicion, just skip something a couple weeks. If somebody asks, you say, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, it must have been stuck in my outbox. It was in drafts. It never got sent. And you can send it immediately. But actually, if no one asks.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, it just came to my mind an idea using like fake door testing. Before you start doing any reports, you just create a link saying, here is the report, open, and see how many people click it. If no one clicks it, you don't even need to start doing that report.
I don't like fake doors simply because you're always setting someone up for disappointment if they click on it.
Recrolling someone.
Yeah. But using those kinds of techniques and tests, I do really like.
That's funny. Cool.
So those are the 3
that makes
things
it 3, right?
Yeah, those are the 3 things I think are table stakes.
Right. Yeah. And I'm shocked that there's 4, because usually for product people, we all know that there's always 3 things, right?
It's the trio.
4, it makes it a bit confusing.
Well, the 4th was the hardest one. So in the canvas, in the product environment canvas that I put together, those 3 are across the top, 3 columns across the top. And then there's 1 column across the entire bottom. And it's not at the bottom because it's less important. It's at the bottom because it's actually the foundation for everything. It cuts across everything. And that's perception. It's okay if you and I think we're doing great on these 3 things. That's what's going to make us good product people. But it's not going to make us great ones if sales, if marketing, if CTO, or if CEO, or if our customers don't agree that we're working on the right priorities, or that our team is fit for purpose, or that the process is working for them. If they have problems with any of those things, you're just not going to be functioning in the way that you ultimately need to. You're not going to have the communication. You're not going to have the collaboration. You're not going to have the entire company working together the way you need it to, the way the best companies do. And this is the thing that I've seen. The people who are really amazing at this job have a sense of this and take real ownership of what is the perception of me and my team across the rest of the organization. How do I build those relationships? And a lot of that is looking at the bigger picture, not always looking at short-term things or looking at the way we think things should be done in a product company. It's saying, okay, we want to do these things for good reasons. They want to do different things for good reasons. What's the bigger picture here? What's the story? What's the motivation? How do we work together to create success rather than just trying to be great at it, things the way we think that we're supposed to be?
In what ways does protection actually influence the other 3 areas here that we are discussing off the canvas?
I think it's absolutely critical to them. If we have our prioritization based on a certain strategy for the company as we understand it, but sales, for example, thinks that strategy is bunk and is trying to sell something different, then they're going to be coming to you with customer requests all the time for things that are outside your ideal customer profile, things that don't make sense, things that are just going to delay you or create bad relationships with the customers. Rich Mironov has a great story about when he goes into companies, if sales is consistently trying to sell customizations and things that aren't on their roadmap, he takes a look at their bonus criteria and rewrites it to make sure that it's based on the actual company strategy rather than just closing deals. So now it's not just, hey, we'll close deals by promising anything. It's we're only going to close the right kind of deals, and we're going to do things that follow the strategy, and so product can build the things that it needs to, and sales will sell the things that we believe are the right way for us to move forward in the longer term.
Can you give us one example of how the product environment canvas actually has been effectively used in a project?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really just a communication thing. So there's
Mm-hmm.
3 ways to use it, and then I'll get into the specifics. So one is using it by yourself, just sitting down and filling it out and saying, taking the prompts there and saying, did I take all this into account? What are the problems that I'm actually facing? Why is this person giving me so much trouble? And sometimes it's just a tool to give you empathy, to help you realize what other people are feeling and what they're seeing. Another way to do it is to help organize your retros. So, retros, there are many different ways of doing it. I think this is a useful one of just saying, what kind of categories can we put things in? And then can we do some prioritization and which things do we want to work on? But again, I think the perception lens is really useful at team level to say, what do other people think of us? And how are we going to serve our internal customers and build the relationships better? And then the third one is using it with your stakeholders to say, how do we create a better environment? If the point of our product teams is to deliver value at pace, not just put code into production, but actually realize value at pace, how do we create a better environment? How do we make sure that the things we're releasing are the right things for our customers that drive our strategy forward? How do we make sure we didn't release something without telling marketing far enough in advance or having them fully on board? Things like that. So it's a great way of just aligning the teams together and having the discussions about where are the problems, what are the one or two things that we as a group of management level stakeholders can work on together to create better relationships across the company. And I think fundamentally it changes it because it goes from being an adversarial discussion, me talking to you back and forth, facing each other, saying, I think this, I think that. If we're able to write everything down, then we are able to go stand virtually side by side and look at this Miro board, this document, whatever together, and start collaborating on how do we prioritize things, which things are we going to work on and not work on. It becomes collaborative and constructive if done well, rather than adversarial. It's not to say it's perfect. It's not going to help every time. When I talk about that terrible exec that I worked with, I'm not sure anything would have helped the two of us repair the relationship. I'm not sure we could have made that work. And that's just, I'm not blaming him in this case on it. I think we're equally to blame. I will take fully understand that. I think, though, that we could have worked as a management team better around some of these things and had better structured discussions across the entire team and found ways to deal with some of the issues. And while our relationship might have still been messy, we could have found a better way to work together, and it would have been better for everyone else in the company. We wouldn't have lost some of the key people we had. We would have created better conditions for them. We wouldn't have fallen so far behind on some of the things we did.
That's cool. That's interesting. I think it makes a lot of sense to have these 3 pillars, because I see a lot of, for example, as you mentioned, some of these frameworks for prioritization, people take it as the solution that will solve everything, but it's not taking into account the other parts. Like there's people there's processes, there's perception that you still need to consider. So if anything, it makes you remember that you have to consider all these different aspects, not just one of them. You can have like the perfect team, but if you don't have the processes or the right priorities, you're still screwed eventually.
And this is my mental model. This is just how this works for me. This is how I perceive things, and it's useful for me to structure conversations in this way. Ultimately, this is a tool, and all tools are awful except when they're useful. This one is useful for me. I hope it's useful for you and for our listeners.
At least for 1 or 2 more people. Otherwise, it would have been a waste of time for you to put it together with the website and so on.
No, not at all. It really helps me. But what I would encourage is, if it's not working for you the way you need it to, it's not your fault. Remix it, redo it, do whatever you need, take inspiration from it. But I think the really critical part is just being able to have better conversations with people and figuring out whatever helps you do that is a good thing.
That's cool. And how would you suggest, so someone listening that finds this mental model or this structure useful, how would you suggest them to start? Like from next week, how can they try it out to see if it works for them?
Yeah, if you come to my website, I'm sure you'll put a link in the show notes, I think. If you come to my site, you can download the template. It's also on Miro as a template. What I would encourage you is just try it out. Spend 10, 15 minutes trying it for yourself. And if you find something interesting, if you find it useful, then the next step is to do it in a retro with your team. And then at something like quarterly planning, do it with your stakeholders. But only use it if there are issues that you need to resolve. If you're seeing things that you need to resolve. If you don't have any issues, then you're probably lying to yourself, and there are other techniques you should
Exactly.
use
You are
about
not.
just having better conversations and doing some discovery with other people about what's. Lily, who's my co-host on the Product Experience podcast, said the other she asked somebody, "Is there anything else you think the product team should be doing?" And it's not a question she had asked to this person before, and they said, "Yeah, actually, there is." And it turned out to be something that was completely legit. It was an interesting thing, and it wasn't something that was on her priority list. So just asking questions like that, things you don't already know the answers to, asking for people's opinions and just useful feedback is always a good thing.
If you
Yeah.
don't have any issues, then probably you are the exec that we're just talking about.
I guarantee you that they think they have issues too.
Yeah.
Although that issue may be you.
Maybe that's their perception. Yeah. But yeah, I guess just to pick on what you said, try it out, see if it works. Eventually ask that question that you mentioned earlier, Randy, that is this really needed? And if it's not worth it, to try to force some framework or model into something that's already smoothly going. All right, let's talk a bit more generally about product management, about what's coming up, what's the future, what does the future look like in your opinion? Or because I heard you like a master that can predict the future, aren't you? You're not.
No, sorry, no eight
Damn.
ball, no magic 8-ball.
Then but yeah, what are the main things that you're seeing coming up in the product space? What are the things that excite you the most?
So I think two opposite questions there. So the things that are coming up, getting even better at dealing with uncertainty. So things like AI, ML, things like that. It's harder for us to understand right now what good these things are going to be and how they're going to be used, but also less predictable than the way we develop things currently. Harder to estimate how long it'll take to build something, to do things. Potentially easier in some ways because there are more components to hook together, but it is something that is really challenging. And we all have enough challenge talking to stakeholders and trying to predict the future right now about how long it's going to take to deliver something. It's always a bit longer than we really hope, right?
Yeah.
So
That's an interesting thought because I think product people are already, at least good product people are already in that mindset, right? That we cannot predict if it's going to be 2 months or 2 years, and then we find ways to communicate it to stakeholders that want like specific dates in a way that's reasonable for them also. But eventually with these trends, things will be even more uncertain, and you'll have to find ways to communicate even more uncertainty.
there's a great tool for that, a great approach for that from a woman named Liz Keogh that I really love. It's her uncertainty estimation approach, or I'm sure there's a better name for it that I'm forgetting. And it's very simple. It's a scale of 1 to 5, and it's a multiplier on your effort estimate. So a 1, something that's going to take exactly as long as we know exactly how long it'll take, is we've all done this before. This is routine. We've done this 1,000 times. We know this will take a day, a week, 20 minutes, whatever it is. A 2, where you double it, is someone on the team has done this, but someone else is going to try it this time, so it might take a bit longer, but that's good. We want to do knowledge transfer and skills development, so we're going to give twice as much time. 3 is someone else in the company has done this, but so we know it's possible, we know it's been done, we have access to it in theory, but we don't have control of their schedule, and we don't know how available they are, but we know it can be done. A 4 is another company's done it. So we know it's possible, it can be done, but it's never been done here. And a 5 is nobody's done this anywhere. This is the first time that we know of that's being tried. And To be honest, it might be even more than a quintupling at that point. It
Yeah,
might
that's
be,
what I was thinking. Maybe that's
but it's a good
20
rule of thumb
times.
for when talking to people saying, how long until this is delivered? It's something we have a high degree of confidence in at 1, 2, 3 levels. You have a reasonable chance of predicting. But at the 4 and 5 levels, you're going into a high degree of
Uncertainty.
unpredictability or
Yeah.
much less lower degree of confidence. And it's a good way of communicating that. You asked me the other trend. I think that the thing that I'm really excited about, despite all of this, despite the increasing uncertainty, I think that the skill set that we have and the skills that we try and develop, we are the best suited people and companies to deal with this, at least in theory. Because the basics of our toolkit of doing discovery, of communicating, of doing looking at it, trying to create strategy and do all the strategic analysis that we do, all of those things are the key building blocks of dealing with uncertainty. So what are things going to look like? We may not always have the answer, or we should know how to get to the answer, or we should be able to bring people together and facilitate the sessions to have that discussion. So I think our skill set, regardless of where we go with AI and ML, where we go with any number of other things, the ability to navigate it and deal with the unpredictable, messy people element of things, I think we are very well suited to being right in the middle of it. So go back to basics, use your skills, and do that again and again.
Yeah. So that probably means there will be a lot of more jobs for product people that will be taking over other roles within companies.
I hesitate to say there'll be more jobs for product people. I think it depends. I don't know where the future is going to go with the term product manager, but I think this skill set is really critical. And some of my favorite projects, some of my favorite consulting gigs are working not with the product team, but with other teams on things like discovery techniques and prioritization techniques and things like that. Product thinking is a real thing. Design thinking, product thinking, all of this. It's a real thing that's applicable across a wide array of places. And we get stuck in our vocabularies and our career track of product management. And sometimes I think that's not always the healthiest.
In what ways?
Just in that we think other people should learn to communicate and use the tools and techniques that we use as product managers, that it's the one true way of going forward. I think ultimately it's the philosophy that's a lot more important. And if you can use different terminology, your CEO and your CFO are not going to know some of your techniques, and they're not going to care about your backlog or how many sprints ahead you should be and things like that. They're not even going to care about continuous discovery. But they will care about a lot of other things. I was at Minded Products conference a few weeks ago, and the day before the big conference, they had a leadership conference. And Georgie Smallwood, who used to be at Tier, she's now at Moonpig, I believe, was talking about the fact that she was trying to introduce the concept of discovery into a company. And the executives, they loved the idea, but then they never carved out the time. They didn't follow through on it. Why should they? They didn't really get it. They knew what to do. But when she changed the vocabulary and said, we're just doing our due diligence on this idea, it totally resonated because they do due diligence on all their deals. They knew exactly what that meant. And fundamentally, what is the difference between due diligence and discovery? It's 2 Ds instead of 1 D. It's the same thing. So there's no reason to get stuck in our language and our techniques. It's the philosophy that matters.
Yeah. This product thinking and the famous "it depends," having that always present.
Yeah, stop saying no, stop saying fail fast, stop saying it depends. Do talk about all that stuff, but you have to learn to spin this stuff in positive, collaborative ways as much as possible. We're learning fast, we're doing our diligence, we're being protecting our investment, we're trying to do all these things. There's different ways of communicating, different languages that we need to learn to speak with other people because they're not going to learn to speak ours.
Yeah, that's a super interesting one. And that example from Georgie Smallwood, it's on point, representing that idea. Thanks for bringing it up. And more generally, maybe not so much on the product management craft, but in terms of the tech industry in general, what do you see as the main challenges in the next few years?
Oh, so there's the big macro trend at the moment of just we went through a big boom over the past few years because money was essentially free. There was no
Hmm.
real interest on things. And it led to big boom, lots of interesting practices and lots of approaches on things. And some people think that that's the only way things will be and that it should always go that way. And those of us who are a bit older, who have lost more hair, probably know they have seen this before and know that it's not always like this. And sometimes it's harder. I think that what happens in these kind of conditions is you realize success covers over a lot of sins in companies. Lots of companies are not well managed. Lots of executives are not incredibly good at their job just because they're in that position. Being a good manager is rare and it's hard. And not every company is always going to be an amazing experience. Ultimately, that's why they pay us. So there are relatively few companies that are the dream job. Figure out how to get things out of the company. How do you deliver value? How do you get value to further your career? But also remember, it's just a job in the end. You have a life around it as well. So try
Hmm.
and find a good balance between both.
I really like that one. It's just a job, exactly that. You have to find your life as well. You have to have time for that and prioritize it the right way. And taking advantage of that, what advice would you give to someone that's looking into entering into product right now?
Enter as in someone who's not a product manager yet,
Yeah,
but one.
breaking into, exactly. Yeah.
So there's a couple of different things. One is don't worry so much about getting the product manager title straight away, especially if you're very early in your career. I find it strange, to be honest, that people get that job first thing. I think it's really a lot more useful to have a different job in the company first. I think product managers have to understand the bigger picture and have some empathy for the way other people do things. So having a couple of other roles in a company is not a bad way of becoming a product manager if that's where your ultimate goal is. You can still use the tenets of product thinking no matter where you are, and you can forge a relationship with the team and see are there things you can do to spend some time, do a bit of an internship with the product team, things like that, and forge the relationships that'll help you potentially answer in at some point when the time is right. The other one is if you haven't been able to get the job at any company or you've been working for a while and there's no opportunities to get into the product tribe in that company, when you're interviewing elsewhere, be ready to talk about how you've already essentially done the job, but without the title, because they're going to be looking for you to explain why you're a good candidate. So you'd better come up with a good story about how you are essentially a product manager. There just wasn't that opportunity in this particular company.
Yeah.
And that could be in the company. It could be doing something on your own, doing a side project where you're just able to describe the entire life cycle. It doesn't have to be something profitable. It can be something for fun. It doesn't have to be big. If it gets to 30 or 50 people, and it doesn't have to be software. Just
Hmm.
find something that makes sense for you that you can explain the entire life cycle, how you thought about it. Ultimately, hiring managers, there's your CV that gets is a tool to get you attention in the first place, but then you have to knock that out of the park in the interview. And they want to hear a good story. They want to understand that you've done this, that you think the right way. And if you can show examples, no matter whether you've had that role or not, that's going to help you a lot.
That's cool.
That's a good one.
Super nice. And yeah, our time is running out. We don't want to make it too long as well. So let's go to our final round of sprint questions. So, as the name says, short questions, short answers. Moving on to the
Sure.
next one. What's one digital product you would struggle to live without?
Oh, I love my podcast player. I make podcasts, but I listen to way too many of them. Yeah, I have a hard time without that.
What's the podcast player you use?
I used to use a different one, and they stopped supporting it anymore. I loved it. So I'm now using Podcast Addict.
Okay. Okay. Cool one. And what's the most underrated skill in product management?
Combination of empathy and storytelling, but I think that the two go hand in hand. If you can't get other people on the same page and working with you, we do relatively little as product managers in terms of delivering the value. We have to motivate other people to work with us. Anything you can do to make that happen is critical.
That's a cool one. And finally, if you could shadow any product manager or leader in general, who would it be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. there's lots of companies I'd be really fascinated to see what they're actually like on the inside. But actually, the first name that popped into my head, whether this is the best answer or not, Storm Fagan. She's the chief product officer at the BBC. We had her on an episode talking about OKRs and the way she approaches it. She's building a fantastic team there. And the BBC, massive organization, public trust. That's got to be one of the most challenging places to do it. So I'd love to see how she pulls it off.
Nice. That's an interesting one. Maybe we should have her as a guest as well.
Good luck.
Seems great. Seems great.
Cool one. All right. Then I think we're ready to wrap it up. Just before we close, Rui, do you have our release notes?
Let's go. So first thing first, I really like that one. Don't forget that sales, marketing, CEO, basically everything around your company, they are not at the same conference as you. So you need to understand them and make you feel understood as well. And regarding this, there's really a big gap between good and great. And that's the leap we need to catch. And for that, and basically also because of the things that we are having in our company, sometimes bad executives, sometimes miss of understanding and storytelling, we have a canvas that try to help people to find a way to, in some of the critical situations, and have empathy for other people. You have to ground it and master your storytelling. This canvas works in 4 different big principles, if we can say it. It's first one, prioritization. You have to understand your priorities that you have a North Star and a definition of success. That is something really needs to be well and clearly defined. Then people, they need to be fit for purpose. Process, you have to be every time making sure you do the right questions. Do we still need this? It's still something that we value. And even though it can hurt, maybe it's better to leave it than to keep something that's running away. And finally, perception. This one, it's not the other 3 like they were at top. This one is bottom and cross the other 3 principles here of prioritization, people, and process. And basically, it's, as we already said, sales, marketing, CEO. So your company, they are not on the same spot as you. You have to make yourself understood and be sure that the work you are doing right now, it's understood as value for everyone at the company. And that will lead to the market as well, find it valid. By the end, don't forget it's a communication tool. It's just a tool. So you can have everything, but you shouldn't be supposed to have a hammer to kill an ant. So use it wisely and use it when you need it. And we have 3 different purposes for when to use it. One, use it for yourself, so you can better fix your mentality and better understand and frame map your mind. Then use it with your teams. Maybe in retros, they are really good. This kind of canvas is really good to use it around the retro. And then use it for your stakeholders. Everyone, same panel, everyone with the same view. Going for product trend now. We are getting better, or we need to get better dealing with uncertainty. So right now, things are moving as fast as we maybe ever seen. Even with AI, that now with generative AI and everything, it's skyrocketing the capabilities we may have. So it's becoming less and less predictable to define when can we really deliver something. It can be shorter or really longer than normally what happens to deliver what we are trying to promise. But despite this, we are the best suited people in companies to tell actually how to deliver it and how to try to help people to understand the values. So we should really get rid of the words. It's not words, but of our language barrier regarding product manager itself. But the thing is, let's go and talk other language as well. Let's go and keep our philosophy and spread it around our company, spread it around the industry, and that will really lead to a product mindset in a lot of the things we are discussing, and have our work being recognized as a great work, even though it can be not a product manager title per se. And this match with the other part, that if you are trying to break into PM, try to find your purpose about product manager and try to find some work that you already been doing, even though without the title, but describe it as it. Describe it as it has actually the title. Describe it as a product. It can be your podcast. It can be everything that you have, but describe it as it should be with most possible things regarding product. But by the end of the day, we just need better conversation with people. I think this was it.
Yeah, wow. I'm impressed.
Better than AI. So yeah, I think this is it. We are almost 1 hour through. This was an amazing conversation. Time flew by. Thanks so much for joining, Randy.
No
nice seeing
problem.
you again.
No problem. If you need anything else
And
from
yeah,
me, let me know.
cool. Amazing. Thank you so much and see you next time.
See you next time. Have a
Thank you,
good one.
Randy.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode with Randy Silver. We hope his insights have sparked some new ideas for your product management journey. You can check out the link in the description to learn more about the canvas. Don't forget to follow us for more episodes like this every 2 weeks and leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. It will take you just a few seconds and it will be an amazing help for us. While Product Weekend is taking a short break from live events until the end of the year, our podcast will keep you connected with the latest in the product world. Check out Product Weekend for more resources and updates. Until next time, keep innovating and see you in the next episode.